Hello, my name is Mark Matsky, and I am from Painesville, Ohio. Today, I will be reading Chapter 36 of Jane of Lantern Hill. Aunt Elmira is dying again, said Ding Dong cheerfully. Jane was helping Ding Dong shingle his father's small barn, doing it very well, too, and getting no end of a kick out of it. It was such fun to be away up in the air where you could see over the whole countryside under its gay and windy clouds, and keep easy tabs on what your neighbors were doing. "Is she very bad this time?" asked Jane, hammering diligently. Jane knew all about Aunt Elmira and her dying spells. She took one every once in so long, and it had really become a nuisance. Aunt Elmira picked such inconvenient times for dying, always when something special was in the offing. Aunt Elmira decided to die and sometimes seemed so narrowly to escape doing it that the bells held their breaths. Because Aunt Elmira did really have a heart condition that was not to be depended on, and who knew but that sometime she really would die. And the bells don't want her to die, Step-a-Yard had told Jane. They need her board. Her annuity dies with her. Besides, she's handy to look after things when the bells want to go gadding. And I won't say, but they're real fond of her, too. Elmira is a good old scout when she isn't dying. Jane knew that. She and Aunt Elmira were excellent friends. But Jane had never seen her when she was dying. She was too weak to see people then, she averred, and the bells were afraid to risk it. Jane, with her usual shattering insight, had her own opinion about these spells of Aunt Elmira's. She could not have expressed it in terms of psychology, but she once told Dad that Aunt Elmira was just trying to get square with something and didn't know it. She felt, rather than knew, that Aunt Elmira liked pretty well to be in the limelight, and as she grew older, resented more and more the fact that she was gently but inexorably being elbowed out of it. Near dying was one way of regaining the center of the stage, for a time at least. Not that Aunt Elmira was a conscious pretender. She always honestly thought she was dying, and very melancholy she was about it. Aunt Elmira was not at all willing to give up the fascinating business of living. "Awful," said Ding Dong. "Mother says she's worse than she's ever seen her. Dr. Abbott says she's lost the will to live. Do you know what that means?" "Sort of," admitted Jane cautiously. "We try to keep her cheered up, but she's awful blue. She won't eat, and she doesn't want to take her medicine, and Ma's at her wit's end. We had everything planned for Brenda's wedding, and now we don't know what to do." "She hasn't died so often before," comforted Jane. "But she's stayed in bed for weeks and weeks and said every day would be her last." "Aunt Elmira," said Ding Dong reflectively, "has bid me a last goodbye 7 times. Now, how can folks have a big wedding if their aunt is dying and Brenda wants a splash? She's marrying into the Keys, and she says the Keys expect it." Mrs. Bell asked Jane to have dinner with them, and Jane stayed because Dad was away for the day. She watched Brenda arrange a tray for Aunt Elmira. "I'm afraid she won't eat a bit of it," said Mrs. Bell anxiously. She was a tired-looking, pleasant-faced woman with kind, faded eyes who worried a great deal over everything. "I don't know what she lives on, and she's so low in her spirits. That goes with the attacks, of course. She says she's too tired to make any effort to get better, poor thing. It's her heart, you know. We all try to keep her cheered up and never tell her anything to worry her. Brenda, mind you, don't tell her the white cow choked to death this morning. And if she asks what the doctor said last night, tell her he thinks she's going to be all right soon. My father always said we should never tell sick people anything but the truth, but we must keep Aunt Elmira cheered up." Jane did not join Ding Dong as soon as dinner was over. She hung about mysteriously till Brenda had come downstairs, reporting that Aunt Elmira couldn't touch a mouthful, and had taken her mother out to settle some question about the amount of wool to be sent to the carding mill. Then Jane sped upstairs. Aunt Elmira was lying in bed, a tiny, shrunken creature with elf locks of gray hair straggling about her wrinkled face. Her tray was on the table, untouched. "If it isn't Jane Stewart," said Aunt Elmira in a faint voice. "I'm glad someone hasn't forgotten me. So you've come to see the last of me, Jane?" Jane did not contradict her. She sat down on a chair and looked very sadly at Aunt Elmira, who waved a claw-like hand at her tray. "I haven't a speck of appetite, Jane, and it's just as well. Ah, me, it's just as well. I feel they begrudge me every bite I eat." "Well," said Jane, "you know, times are hard, and prices low." Aunt Elmira hadn't quite expected this. A spark came into her queer little amber eyes. "I'm paying my board," she said, "and I earned my keep years before I started doing that." "Ah, well, I'm of no consequence to them now, Jane. We're not after we get ill." "No, I suppose not," agreed Jane. "Oh, I know too well I'm a burden to everyone, but it won't be for long, Jane. It won't be for long. The hand of death is on me, Jane. I realize that if nobody else does." "Oh, I think they do," said Jane. "They're in a hurry to get the barn shingled before the funeral." The spark in Aunt Elmira's eyes deepened. "I suppose they've got it all planned out, have they?" she said. "Well, I did hear Mr. Bell saying something about where he would dig the grave, but maybe he meant the white cows. I think it was the cows. It choked to death this morning, you know. And he said he must have the south gate painted white before something, but I didn't just catch what." "White? The idea! The gate has always been red." "Well, why should I worry? I'm done with it all." "You don't worry about things when you're listening for the footfall of death, Jane." "Shingling the barn, are they? I thought I heard hammering. That barn didn't need shingling. But Silas was always extravagant when there's no one to check him up." "It's only the shingles that cost. The work won't cost anything. Ding Dong and I are doing it." "I suppose that's why you've got your overalls on. Time was I couldn't abide a girl in overalls." "But what does it matter now? Only you shouldn't go barefoot, Jane. You might get a rusty nail in your foot." "It's easier getting round the roof with no shoes, and little Sid got a rusty nail in his foot yesterday, although he had shoes on." "They never told me. I dare say they'll let that child have blood poisoning when I'm not round to look after him. He's my favorite, too." "Ah, well, it won't be long now. They know where I want to be buried, but they might have waited till I was dead to talk of grave digging." "Oh, I'm sure it was the cow," said Jane, "and I'm sure they'll give you a lovely funeral. I think Dad would write a beautiful obituary for you if I asked him." "Oh, all right. All right, that's enough about it anyway. I don't want to be buried till I am dead." "Did they give you a decent bite of dinner?" "Nettie is kind-hearted, but She isn't the best cook in the world. I was a good cook. Ah, the meals I've cooked up in my time, Jane. The meals I've cooked. Jane missed an excellent opportunity to assure Aunt Elmira she would cook many more meals. The dinner was very nice, Aunt Elmira, and we had such fun at it. Ding Dong kept making speeches, and we laughed and laughed. They can laugh, and me dying, said Aunt Elmira bitterly, and pussyfooting round in here with faces as long as today and tomorrow, pretending to be sorry. What was them dragging noises I've been hearing all the forenoon? Mrs. Bell and Brenda were rearranging the furniture in the parlor. I expect they're getting it ready for the wedding. Wedding? Did you say wedding? Whose wedding? Why, Brenda's. She's going to marry Jim Keyes. I thought you knew. Course I knew they were going to be married sometime. But not with me dying. Do you mean to tell me they're going ahead with it right off? Well, you know it's so unlucky to put a wedding off. It needn't disturb you at all, Aunt Elmira. You're up here in the L all by yourself, and Aunt Elmira sat up in bed. You hand me my teeth, she ordered. They're over there on the bureau. I'm going to eat my dinner, and then I'm going to get up if it kills me. They needn't think that they're going to sneak a wedding off me. I don't care what the doctor says. I've never believed I was half as sick as he made me out I was anyhow. Half the valuable stock on the place dying, and children having blood poisoning, and red gates being painted white. It's time somebody showed them.